Hey, Dan Beagleman here. This video is on the Dorian Mode. It's the second in a series of 7 videos on the modes based on the major diatonic scale. In this video, I'll talk about the chemistry of the Dorian Mode, what makes it sound the way it does, applications for soloing, improvising, coming up with ideas for composition, and also talk about application in terms of using the correct chord or chords and key for the Dorian Mode. And then of course I'll discuss mixing the Dorian Mode with the correct Pentatonic and Blues scale, so this way you get the most out of your playing. Okay, on to the Dorian Mode. Okay, why does the Dorian Mode sound the way it does? Every scale or mode is made up of a sequence or a pattern of steps. Sometimes whole steps, half steps, and even occasionally 1.5 steps. Remember, a step is 2 frets and a half step is 1 fret. So the pattern or sequence for Dorian Mode is whole, half, whole, 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 half, whole. Say that 5 times fast. So to demonstrate, I'll show you a Dorian Mode on 1 string. If I hit I'll use the string 5 to demonstrate, since it's an A note, the A Dorian Mode on string 5. A note. Now, a whole step higher, a half step higher, a whole step higher, a whole step, a whole step, a half step, and a whole step again. So I have, and if I start on any note and follow that sequence, whole, half, whole, 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 half, whole, I'll be playing a Dorian Mode. Now if I look at that pattern that I just played, the Dorian Mode on the 5th string, there's 2 things I can take away from that. Look at the notes I'm playing. A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A. Okay? So I have 6 natural notes and 1 sharp, F sharp. What does that tell me? The key of G has an F sharp in it. So an A Dorian Mode is actually like a G major scale, except starting on the 2nd tone or the 2nd degree of the G scale. Here's a G major scale. You know, regular do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. G, A, B's. Right? But if I play the same scale, the same pattern, but start on the 2nd degree, which is A, it's going to sound like this. So the A Dorian Mode is actually a G scale, just starting on the 2nd degree. Listen to this. Here's a G chord. Here's a G scale. Now here's an A minor chord. And I'm going to play the A Dorian Mode, which is, again, a G major scale starting on the 2nd degree. Here's the A minor chord, and here's the A Dorian Mode. Sounds like it matches with that chord. So it's very interesting to see that. And the takeaway from that is you can just think, okay, if I want to play a Dorian Mode, I can just play a major scale a whole step under the key that I'm playing in, because G is a whole step under A. So you think this real quickly. If I'm in A and I want Dorian Mode, a whole step under A is G. So again, if I'm in A, play a G scale. But focus on the 2nd degree of the scale, because you want to know that that's the center, or the key center of the scale. You don't want to, if you're playing an A minor chord and you play the starting and ending on G, it still sounds like an Ionian mode or a major scale. But again, if I play the A minor chord and I play just a G scale, but starting on the 2nd degree, starting and ending on the 2nd degree, I have, and it just sits right in there and matches perfectly. So an A Dorian Mode is a G major scale, but starting and ending or focusing on the 2nd degree as your key note. Now another way to look at the Dorian Mode is to think of it in terms of relating to a minor scale, because it's a minor sounding mode. An A natural minor scale has all natural notes. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. That's your A minor scale. And A Dorian mode has an F sharp. So I can also think of a Dorian mode as a natural minor scale with a raised sixth tone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the sharp sixth. So two ways to think of a Dorian mode. It's a natural minor scale with a raised sixth tone, or it could be looked at as a major scale played one whole step under the key, but focused, as I said before, focusing on the second degree as your key center. There are many patterns across the fingerboard for playing modes, scales, and there are some that are more user-friendly. I tend to like this one I'm about to show you for many, many reasons, especially how it will lock in with pentatonic and blues scales. Again, later in the video, I'll demonstrate that. Here's an A Dorian mode in position 7. That means I'm covering frets 7 through 10. Think of a finger to a fret. And I'm going to start on the string 4 with my first finger, string 4, fret 7, first finger. The reason I'm starting on that note is because that's an A note. I'll cover the entire range vertically in that particular area. The lowest note is going to be B, which is the second tone in the scale. The highest note is going to be D, which is the fourth tone in the scale. So again, I want to start and end on the A note, and that helps me to really hear. It helps your ear to identify the key center, you know, the center of the scale. Okay, here's an A Dorian mode in position 7. If I just went back one note, which is G, and started and ended here, as I mentioned before, an A Dorian mode is the same as a G scale as far as the notes that it contains. You'll hear very strikingly how you can hear the difference. Same thing I just played, but I'm going to start and end on this. You know, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So it's amazing how just starting on the different note, you know, just changes the whole thing up. And that's because the chemistry or the sequence of the steps, as I mentioned earlier, the sequence of the whole steps and half steps, that's what makes one scale sound different than another one. So again, A Dorian mode, position 7, starting and ending on this A note. And another nice thing about this particular pattern is, if I think of it in for practicing, I can think of it in terms of 8 sets of 16th notes, and then on the 9th beat, if you will, it will, you know, end. So I'm going to count beats out as I play this, and like I said, it's very, very sequenced. It sits very, very nicely. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, and I'll just reverse it. I'll start on this same A note. I'll go to the lowest note, to the highest note, and return back to that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Great for practicing, and like I said, it's very, very sequenced, and it just really, really sits nicely. So if you put a metronome on, great for your hands, and also getting the scale in your hands, because, you know, use that expression, muscle memory. You want to get these scales in your hands and in your head so you don't have to think about it, and then when you're using it in a playing situation, it'll just be as natural as the basic pentatonic scales that everybody's probably playing. When using any particular mode or scale, you have to take into consideration where you're using it. Remember, there are major chords, minor chords, dominant chords, and then of course keys. There are major keys and minor keys. Not every mode is going to work in every particular situation, obviously. So the Dorian mode I think of as a minor mode. And what do I mean by that? Again, if I played an A Dorian mode, if I take the first, third, and fifth degree, because chords are built on basic triads, you know, your basic minor or major triad is the first, third, and fifth degree of a scale. So if I take the first note, the third note, and the fifth note, which is A, C, E, what does that tell me? That's an A minor chord. So because the Dorian mode contains the root note, the minor third of A, and an E note, 1 flat 3 5 in the key of A, That tells me that the Dorian mode is going to work with A minor chords, or in the key of A minor. Now, putting the Dorian mode to use in a real playing situation. As I mentioned, the Dorian mode I think of as a minor mode because it has a minor third in it, so it will sit nicely over minor chords or in a minor key, but not every single playing situation or genre of music. The Dorian mode, in my opinion, is great for rock, again, in a minor key. Rock, some jazz rock, maybe even a little jazz, if you will. Not so great for, again, it's just my opinion, metal or heavy metal type music. There are other modes that will sit better in those, and I'll get to those in other videos. The Phrygian mode, the Locrian mode, and then exotic scales, which I'll cover in other videos, like harmonic minor scales and variations on harmonic minor scales. That being said, looking at the Dorian mode, what will it really work well with? Okay, let's say I take a chord pattern like a 1-4 pattern, like let's say A minor 7 to D9, and if I play this cycle, like a Santana kind of a thing, you know, Evil Ways or stuff like that. Carlos Santana uses the Dorian mode a lot, and the reason why it sits so nicely right in there is because here's an A minor 7th chord, so I'm in a minor key. Dorian mode right there. When I go to the 4 chord and play D ninth, if you look at this chord, there's an F sharp in there, right? So that F sharp, remember I talked about earlier that the Dorian mode has an F sharp in it, so it's a perfect fit. A minor. Okay, Dorian mode, Santana. You want to sound like Carlos Santana? Use a Dorian mode. Okay, let's say, you know, Light My Fire by the Doors. Remember that extended guitar solo? That's built on just 2 chords, A minor 7, B minor 7. When he gets to the B minor 7, if you look on string 2, hey, there's an F sharp again, right? Because if I played a natural minor scale over this, if I went, that's an A natural minor scale, it has an F natural note. That F natural note is going to clash with the B minor 7th, which has an F sharp note in it. Not to get too deep in the woods theory-wise, but again, as you can see, this Dorian mode just sits so nicely in some of these situations. That beginning to the Light My Fire guitar solo, it has that F sharp in there. So again, Dorian mode, great. You want to sound like Santana? Play Dorian mode. You want to sound like Robbie Krieger on Light My Fire? Dorian mode. You want to sound like Duane Allman and Dickie Betts? Dorian mode. Those extended guitar solos on those, you know, Elizabeth Reed and Whipping Post and all of those great Allman Brothers songs, so much of the guitar soloing is built on the Dorian mode mixed with the minor pentatonic and the minor blues scales. One of the cool things you can do with the modes is mix them with the pentatonic and or blues scales. Remember, there are 2 types of pentatonic scales, major and minor, and 2 types of blues scales, major and minor. Being that there are 7 modes, each one of them will be either a minor type or a minor sounding mode and or a major sounding mode. And then I can mix that with the correct pentatonic and or blues scale. The Dorian mode, being that it has a minor third, and we talked about that earlier, is a minor sounding mode. That means I can mix it up with a minor pentatonic scale and or a minor blues scale. Again, using the key of A to demonstrate, here's that here's that A Dorian mode that we were working on earlier. Position 7, fret 7 to 10. If I shoot back to position 5, and I'm in now covering frets 5 through 8, here's the basic minor pentatonic scale that I imagine everybody knows. And the minor blues scale. Okay, now if I combine these scales together, I can get a lot out of it in terms of a wider range, a wider area of the fingerboard that I'm covering, and just a lot more going on musically. To demonstrate, here's an A minor pentatonic scale, and the next note, the next root note, because remember, a pentatonic scale is a 5-tone scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 6th note in the scale is the root note or the octave for the root note for the 2nd octave. Okay, so now instead of getting that with my 3rd finger, I'm going to get that with my 1st finger, so I'm going to shift up 2 frets. Shift up. What did that do? It now put me in the position for that Dorian mode. Okay, so now I'm connecting the lower half of the pentatonic, the minor pentatonic scale, and the higher part, or the higher, a little more than a half, of the Dorian mode. So now putting that all together, going up and down, I'll start on the lowest note of the pentatonic scale. Shift up. So I'm mixing up part of the pentatonic scale and part of the Dorian mode. And again, if you want to use a glissando or slide to connect them together, it's a little nicer sounding too. Like that. So what you can do is you can look at the strings and the fingering on whatever string you're on, and you can use that same, if the same finger applies, you can use that as a bridge to slide, to the next scale, or the Dorian mode from the pentatonic. In other words, the pentatonic scale, if let's say I use string 2, has fingers 1 and 4, and the Dorian mode also has the 4th finger on string 2, so I can use that and slide there, or the 1st finger. So whichever finger is the same, or between these two scales, the pentatonic minor and the Dorian, if the same finger on any particular string is being used, that finger can be used as a glissando, as a slide, or a bridge to connect the two scales together. And again, when you put this all together, you are now covering a wider range of the fingerboard and making use of 2 types of scales, the pentatonic and the blues scale being a little bit more like rock blues sounding, if you will, and the in the Dorian mode being a little bit more jazz rock sounding. Mixing these two together will give you so much information musically, so many, just so much stuff to play. And as I said earlier, the Allman brothers, so much of these guitar solos, like on Whipping Post and Elizabeth Reed, these extended jams make use of mixing minor pentatonic and Dorian mode. And again, there's obviously other patterns for all of these scales across the fingerboard, but just making use of these 2 common patterns will give you a wealth of material to play. So again, connect the minor pentatonic or minor blues scale with the Dorian mode in position 7, and you have a tremendous amount of material to work with. Now I'll just demonstrate playing a little bit, mixing the Dorian mode with the minor pentatonic and minor blues scales. I'll use the key of A as an example. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave any questions or comments in the comments section below. I'm Dan Beagleman, and that's the Dorian mode. Have a nice day.